All right. Hey, good morning, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Today is Thursday, September 15th, 2022. This is your morning tropical update. We are tracking a new active system in the Atlantic Basin. Been a few days since we talked. I had a hard time finding time for a video, but we do have one today for you. And we are tracking newly formed Tropical Storm Fiona, located in the central Atlantic Basin. Tropical Storm Fiona has winds about 50 miles an hour, moving off to the west, set to impact the northern Caribbean islands and eventually could have some U.S. impacts down the road. That'll be the majority of the video today. We also have a tropical invest coming off the coast of Africa. Plenty of time to watch that, and we'll cover the Eastern Pacific and the Western Pacific towards the end of the video. So go ahead and take a look at the morning forecast for Fiona. We should just have gotten the 11 a.m. advisory, so we'll open that up, and we do have that. So we have some new information from the Hurricane Center, but no major changes, it appears. So 11 a.m. advisory, hot off the press. Maximum sustained winds are still 50 miles an hour, and the movement is to the west at 14 miles an hour for Fiona. We see a host of tropical storm watches and warnings in effect this morning. We'll go ahead and go to them. I am not going to try to pronounce all these names of the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, but you guys can read them here on your screen and go to the National Hurricane Center's page. You can see this under the public advisory if you want to see who is under what sort of watch or warning. Remember, tropical storm watch is tropical storm conditions within 48 hours. A warning is those same conditions within 24 hours. That's winds above 45 miles an hour, and or any other heavy rain surge associated with a tropical storm. So all these islands are expecting a tropical storm. Right now, Fiona is not forecast to get stronger than a tropical storm right now, but you always plan for a category higher. So, plan for a hurricane, but expect a tropical storm should be the name of the game there. So we'll have a new discussion. I'll read that later, but we're pretty much tracking what they're doing this morning. So this is the first couple stabs at the Hurricane Center's current track, and we'll talk about track and intensity in a minute because I want to make sure we reiterate when we talk about the future of Fiona, it is tied to her intensity. So let's go ahead and check in on the storm right now. This is the morning satellite presentation here on Tropical Tidbits. I always like to plug this site. It's a fantastic website. It's free, and one Levi Cowan runs this site. He does a fantastic job and does videos like this. I would encourage you to check them out if you like this sort of thing. His videos are probably a lot better than mine, but we do our best around here, and that's what counts. So, looking at Fiona satellite presentation, this is a very sheared tropical storm this morning. We are talking about a system dealing with a heavy amount of wind shear. The first indication we have is that the low-level circulation is totally exposed. So, this swirl right here you're watching is the low-level center of Fiona. This is actually Fiona. The mass of thunderstorms is trailing significantly back off into the east. The low level center is almost about to run away from the mid level center and the thunderstorm activity. This is a heavy amount of wind shear. This is all thanks to an upper trough set across the region. We can see this on water vapor a little bit better. It's still hard to see. It's kind of off screen, but the trough kind of orients in this sort of direction. And you can see high clouds in this little cluster of thunderstorms ahead of Fiona, and Fiona's outflow channels not only are being compressed by a sinking high to the north, but are also trailing away from the storm. So a lot of times on a very healthy tropical storm, you'll see these outflow channels in multiple ways, but in Fiona's, it's kind of trailing pretty far back, and these high clouds indicating that the storm is undergoing a heavy amount of wind shear. That wind shear is when the atmospheric winds surrounding the storm are blowing in a different direction than what the storm likes. Hurricanes don't like to have other winds interfering with them. They like to have nice calm winds around them so they can spin up and do their thing. But what's happening is in the upper levels of the atmosphere off the surface, the winds are blowing in a very different direction. So in the low levels near the surface of the earth and a couple thousand feet up, your winds are more out of the west. So the low level clouds you see all over here are all moving off to the west, moving off to the left. Well, in the upper levels, there is a upper trough moving through something like this. It's imparting a lot of deep southwest winds across Fiona's circulation, and all these higher thunderstorms. Remember, these thunderstorms extend well up into the atmosphere. If just for a second, if you imagine this is the surface of your water, your thunderstorm, just for the sake of illustration here, goes up, goes up, goes up. Well, normally, if there's nothing bothering it, it just goes up, gets taller, gets stronger. You get more pressure falls, you get a stronger storm, yada da da da. Well, what happens with something like this is you have your same water surface, your thunderstorms start going up, but then this deep southwest wind shear comes along and it blows the thunderstorm tops off. You can see these clouds racing away over here. What that does, it knocks the thunderstorm tops off and it prevents them from intensifying and prevents the storm from strengthening. This also has a 1-2 combination with dry air, which Fiona is still kind of dealing with. The whole Atlantic has been pretty dry this year. It's been one of the reasons we haven't seen a ton of tropical systems. We're still behind island schedule, and that wind shear and dry air combination, that wind shear punches the dry air in, and then the dry air gets in there and kind of wreaks havoc. So it's why these storms aren't wrapping around, and it's why they're only sustaining down shear of the storm. When Fiona begins to strengthen, you will see these storms start wrapping around this low level vortex, but it's going to take a little while to do that. So that's why Fiona is not expected to intensify a whole lot in the next couple days. This upper trough is not forecast to move all that much. Okay, going back to the track, we see the next couple days, Hurricane Center is pretty high confidence. This is going to move some component of west, and we're going to get this thing moving through the Virgin Islands sometime the start of this weekend. It'll be in the vicinity of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola, Hispaniola being the island of the Dominican Republic and Haiti, sometime Sunday into Monday. This is when the forecast begins to diverge. We'll show you the GFS and the Euro's solutions for this. We're looking at 850 millibars for the GFS and the Euro, just showing two different depictions of what could happen. This is the 0Z model run from this morning. So we'll see the European move this along. And we'll take you through to Sunday, so Friday, Saturday. The European sees this as a pretty good amount of intensity. It's pretty much tracking what the Hurricane Center has, showing tropical storm intensity. It's showing that shear, showing that system having a hard time staying closed, but shows a tropical storm strength system moving through the Virgin Islands on Saturday, Puerto Rico on Sunday, where some intensification happens, and then it gets into the vicinity of Hispaniola on Sunday into early Monday morning. Now, in this track, the European takes this below Puerto Rico and Hispaniola and then turns it up. That's important. The interaction with Puerto Rico and Hispaniola are important because these are both mountainous islands. Even Puerto Rico does not have the mountains that Hispaniola does. Hispaniola has ridiculous mountains. Puerto Rico is still pretty hilly, and even a well-developed storm, like if you remember Maria hit about 5 years ago, Maria was a Category 4, almost Category 5 hurricane, and it never quite recovered from Puerto Rico. So these islands can have a pretty detrimental effect, but it depends on how storms hit them and how strong they are when they hit them. In this solution, the European goes under the island and comes up. This would be the worst case scenario for Fiona as far as her intensification, because this would have to drag the circulation over and through the mountain, and that's going to be bad news for it. GFS shows a little bit different solution. So the GFS moves Fiona along as a stronger storm and a slower storm. Not way slower, but it is a bit slower than the European sees this. The GFS sees a stronger storm, so it moves it a little bit slower because it's being pulled on by the upper levels a little bit more. GFS moves us through on Saturday into Sunday, but look what happens here Sunday into Monday. The GFS has a more abrupt turn north of Puerto Rico. So 18Z on Monday, the GFS has already pulled this north of Puerto Rico and missed it. The European at 18Z on Monday is literally sitting this thing right over Hispaniola. This would be a death sentence for Fiona, at least in the short term. So remember, the GFS 18Z on Monday is here, Europeans here. You all have this considerable difference in spread, intensity, and forward speed. So we have definitely a different bit of interest here. And again, that forward speed is all tied to the intensity of Fiona. If she's able to overcome this environment, she will move a bit slower and want to turn north sooner. Because in the upper levels of the atmosphere, the steering currents that are going to be driving these storms, the storm is going to be based on a dip in the jet stream. So what's happening right now, I'll back this up to show you what's going on. This is the GFS again, just for illustration right now. There's an upper level ridge in the Atlantic Basin that's steering her along. So these ridges rotate in a clockwise direction, and it's moving the system off to the west right now. Okay, she's going to basically round the corner of this ridge is what she's trying to do. But these weather patterns move constantly. They're moving, shifting, falling apart, building. They don't just sit in one spot statically. So she's trying to round this, but then this is also moving around and weakening and strengthening itself. So there's a delicate balance here. As we go into Saturday into Sunday, notice what happens is the ridge weakens and it kind of moves away. The center of the ridge kind of shifts away. And you have this sort of weakness opening up on the ridge as this upper trough comes in, tries to break down that clockwise steering flow that's pulling Fiona along. GFS sees this as a weakening ridge, and that's where it starts pulling northward into this weakness created as the ridge shifts. European model is going to see a little bit different. The European sees it a little bit stronger, but the European sees that ridge a little bit further back, and it pushes it a little bit further along. You see the edge of the ridge more over to the Bahamas, where the GFS, it just doesn't have nearly as strong of a signal, so there's more of a weakness for Fiona to begin to move into. These storms move around high pressure ridges, and they move into low pressure areas. They kind of pinball around the highs. They can't push through highs. They move around highs. So that's kind of what we're watching from there. So when we get into Sunday, Monday, that is when the fork in the road happens. If Fiona is a stronger storm, she'll want to hook further north. If she's weaker, she'll want to push further west. This is shown by some of the ensemble models over here on weathernerds.org, another fun free website. This is ensembles for the European and GFS. The GFS ensembles especially illustrate exactly what we're talking about. Notice how over here we have the bright colors on the spaghetti charts, for lack of a better term, showing that the stronger members pulled us north sooner. The weaker members, the ones in blue and green, showing a weaker storm, are further south and west. So there are two different options on the table depending on how well Fiona deals with her environment over the next few days. The European does not have as many strong members, but even the few that are strong are showing that earlier turn. Just these few little sprigs of yellow popping up, showing you that there are some worlds where the Euro sees a stronger storm and it pops out sooner. So that's kind of the illustration there. This matches up well with your statistic dynamic models. Most of them do pull this north. But again, this exact trajectory, even in itself, is a big deal. The pull north, if the storm hits Hispaniola, but it grazes the north side and most of the heavy weather stays offshore, it's not going to significantly disrupt the storm. If the heaviest weather of Fiona is on the north and east side, which is what we know, and the storm comes across under Hispaniola and comes up, that puts the heavy weather right into that mountain. That's going to slam those winds into the mountain, and it's going to cause a significant disruption of Fiona. And you're going to have a very ragged storm trying to come across, and a very ragged storm may not hook back out to sea. A ragged storm will probably continue more like this, which then the question would be, can it reform near Cuba, the Bahamas? That water is ridiculously warm. Does Florida get in play? Does the Carolinas get in play? Does Georgia get in play? Or does this thing like drift even further west, go across Cuba, maybe go into the Gulf of Mexico? There's a whole lot of options on the table. And the final fly in the ointment, I'll tell you guys this too. We're looking at a long wave pattern that's pretty chaotic right now. And why is that? Well, we have two recurving typhoons. Okay, over in the Joint Typhoon Warning Center, we have Typhoon Mufia and Typhoon Mirbach that are recurving up into the northern Pacific. Okay, so this is going to disrupt the overall steering pattern. And when this happens, the computer models struggle to show what all the other weather is doing because the recurving typhoons blow everything apart. This is the long wave pattern in the global northern hemisphere. So the US down here, obviously, and your jet stream kind of runs along in this in some form or fashion. And these ridges and troughs are what kind of govern where these storms move. Okay. Well, we have a recurving typhoon, and I think that's Mirbach right there. This is a couple days ago. This is like the 14th. But it moves up into the Aleutian Islands in Alaska as this powerful storm that develops, and there's another typhoon recurving in behind that. So you've got these two typhoons that come in, and this thing just comes into the global weather pattern, and it begins to wreck it. You got this big cutoff, or you have this big oh, was it a Rex block? I think the one with the lows under the high. I don't know. It's been a little while since I went to school for this. But you've got this blocking pattern over the Western Pacific. You've got my pen going way too big on size. You've got this bigger trough developing over the Western U.S. And what's going to happen is a ridge is also going to build over the central U.S. as a result of this. But how that gets modeled, it really depends. You see that ridge comes in around early next week. Fiona's offshore down here. What does this ridge look like? Is it further east? Does it bump Fiona away? Is it further west? Does it allow Fiona to come closer to the coast? That also is impactful. And with the typhoons recurving and blowing up the global weather pattern, the models are going to have a hard time handling that. So don't trust models too much on this one. We're going to have to use a real-time clues and visual analysis, and we're going to see how it plays out. So that's kind of the latest on that with Fiona, guys. Again, a couple days to watch. Not much is going to happen in the next couple days, but again, every bit of forward speed and or intensity change will change downstream. So too early to say any U.S. impacts. No one should be worried. No one should be freaking out. No one should be running for the hills. But anyone from the Gulf Coast to Florida to the Carolinas, and even further north, New England and stuff, there's something you want to keep an eye on too. Need to be at least watching it right now. So that's the latest on Fiona. We will have plenty more on Fiona in the next couple of days. We will keep track of this as best we can. I should have a good amount of time in the next few days, so we'll be able to get you some more content on it. Real quick, rest of the tropics, Hurricane Center's two areas are watching in the eastern Pacific. Both these are going to develop. The one here is going to move away. This one more likely to drift into Mexico, so some heavy rain likely for them, but we'll have one or two more named storms in the eastern Pacific soon. As we already kind of talked about, we have these two recurving typhoons, Tropical Storm Mufia moved in near Shanghai, and this is going to eventually move away. And Mirbach, the one that stayed offshore, is about to go into Alaska as a powerful winter type low pressure system, their first big winter storm of the season. And then we have Nam Madol, a big tropical storm right here, set to become the next big typhoon in the basin. Boy, this basin, when it woke up, it woke up. The Western Pacific was very sleepy this year, but not the case anymore. Nam Madol is going to get itself together in the next couple of days and is forecast to become a significant typhoon and impact Japan. Winds peaking at 120 knots or 140 miles an hour, well into Category 4. And oftentimes the JTWC can be known to under forecast these storms a little bit, so it's going to probably get into well into Category 4 range, and it should be slamming southern Japan going into next couple of days, like about the 18th, so over the weekend. Looks like Japan's going to get hit by a pretty significant large typhoon, so not great news for them. So that's what I got for you guys this morning on your tropical update. Again, we'll have more on Fiona as needed, and too early to say on U.S. impacts, but if anything comes up, we will let you know, and we will follow this along from start to finish. So that's what I got for you guys this morning. As always, thanks for watching, and have a good one.